This is a meetup organized by our design system community, chapter Czechia, and we recently became the chapter of the global design system community, which is a community which has a lot of other chapters all around the world, and it's great to be part of that. I am Ondřej Havlíček, and I am one of the organizers of our chapter. And
here I am, Ondřej Havlíček, another organizer of this meetup. I work at Quadient as design system lead on our design system, and welcome everybody on this meetup. I'm so excited to be here to organize this. That's probably my intro for now.
Yeah, thank you, Ondřej. And I am working as a design system lead at Product Board. I will tell more about the company later. I want to also thanks to everyone from Design System Community Global and also from Dublin chapter, because they helped us tremendously with organizing this meetup. So thanks for your support. I would like to also mention our two sponsors. One is the company Product Board. We are a product management platform where you can collect and work with the user's feedback, then assign it to features and create a roadmap and so on. And there is also kiwi.com, which is a online travel agency. Sorry, I expected Luděk to step up and tell something, but that's okay. And kiwi.com is an online travel agency, and they are like supporting us for last 2 years, which is great. Even that we are online meetup, we have a code of conduct. We definitely should respect everyone else. This should be legal activity. We should play it nice, but most importantly, we should protect our privacy because that's the thing that matters the most. And as a chapter of design systems community, we also have set of values we really like, and we want to embody these values in our meetups. It's a lot about collaborative working, about being accessible. That's one of the reasons why our meetups are actually in English, even that it's not our first language. But most importantly, we want to have fun, and we want you to have fun on our meetups. The topic of today's meetup is selling and scaling design systems, and I will get to this. And we have two amazing speakers from a company called Quadient. It's Ondřej and Richard, and they will tell us later about something about their experience with design systems. And we also have Slido prepared for you. The code is DS_CZE. And if you go there is a question for you, who is primarily responsible for the design system in your company. It would be great if you could go there and vote. It will give us some information about your possible expectations and about the content we should prepare for our next meetups. And feel free to ask any questions to our speakers there. We will have QA sessions in the end. I touched up the agenda a bit, so we will start with a talk from Ondřej Havlíček, building consistency in the world of autonomous teams. Then Richard will tell us more about like how they solve inconsistencies in their Quadient design system. It will be case study with a lot of examples. Sorry, and then we have a Q&A session where we answer your questions. And I will give word to Luděk now.
Thanks a lot. So first things first, let's look on the question and its answers. And it looks like we have for now 4 answers to the question, who is primarily responsible for the design system in your company? From the answers, it seems that the majority of people has partially dedicated designer or developer, and also there is one answer for front-end platform team and one for established design system team, just for the product design system. Okay, pretty interesting that the most answered our chosen answer is partially Diki designer. Oh, just change that. And I'm looking forward to see and to hear what Ondřej from Quadient will tell us about building consistency in the world of autonomous teams as our first speaker. So welcome, Ondřej.
Thank you, Luděk. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the welcome. And without further ado, let's start.
Okay.
Okay, just to check in, it's my first online presentation. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it works.
Okay, thanks. Cool. Well, so good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I'm gonna talk about how we started, how we implemented, and what we have done so far in the direction towards the design system. The talk has basically three parts. The first part is very short. It will be about 10 years when we were thinking what to do before we finally concluded to go in the design system direction. The second part is about how we started, how we persuaded the key people, and the third part is about what we have done. So what the design system means for us. So first of all, let me introduce myself. So I'm Ondra. I'm in charge of the user experience and graphics team, or UX and UI team in Quadient, or Quadient CZ. What is Quadient? So we are a software company, and we create software for enterprise customers mostly. So our field of expertise is customer communications management. So it means that our customers are companies like enterprises, big companies, banks, insurances, utility companies, who for some reason need to send communications to their customer. Communications like invoices, account statements, so on and so forth. We produce a product suite of several products which cover the different phases of different parts of this process, from, for example, connection to data sources, content authoring, or document or communication template authoring, and the actual production orchestration at the end. So it means we have a range of software products. Another thing I want to mention about the company is it has been rather successful because we have experienced substantial growth in the last 10 years. So in 2010, I could say that the R&D organization where we developed the software, in 2010, it was about 100 people strong with a design team of 5. Today, in 2020, we're talking about 400 people and 20 head strong design team. So this is another reason, apart from the big product range, that the consistency has always been a topic for us. So what we did before we came to the design system. So here you can see that actually 10 years ago, we had a style guide. So what was the situation then? So we had several products, and the differences between the products were really big. Different UI, different technology. Like it was even very difficult to integrate those products together, in spite of the fact that it was kind of like a common scenario. What was the reason? I think the biggest reason was the great autonomy of the particular development teams. But they didn't create different products just for fun. The idea was, when they started with a new product, so they used the newest technology, the newest design, which was available. So this is how it happened, and there was no kind of direction to keep it consistent. So at this situation, we started working on a UI style guide, but the problem was that it was it was a vain effort, I would say, because the problem with style guides, in my opinion, they become quickly obsolete because they just fall behind innovation. And when they're either small, so not enough information, or just too big, and basically nobody reads them. So then later on, we learned about things like, I don't know, UI frameworks, atomic design, stuff like that. So we started experimenting with UI frameworks. So we started with the CSS framework, and later on we moved to a component framework. But all of this, it was like, it was kind of a developer or skunkwork projects initiated by the developers or the UX team. So it wasn't really supported by the organization, and it wasn't really successful. I know, I'll explain later. What is important, in 2016, the management realized that the consistency is important, and initiated a project codenamed a Green Stripe. It was because of the green UI. So what was it? So it was kind of style guide driven effort to make our products consistent. The problem with this, it was really focused on the first site experience. So the problem, so basically when you started using the products, the inconsistencies, the little differences, they started to emerge, and there was no there was no determination to take it further. So this is how we, or this was the point when I and some of the people realized that we need a design system. So to summarize the first part, what we learned on the road to design system. So first thing is the style guide is just not enough. It falls behind innovation. Nobody reads it in the end, and so it's a kind of dead thing. Also, UI component library without correct processes, without management, is not enough. We ended up with a component library with something like 400 components, and the problem was that they were like locally created, locally used, so we were unable to reuse them across the portfolio, and we lacked more complex patterns. On the positive side, a breaking point for us was when we ended like arguments about what JavaScript technology, what JavaScript framework is best, and we adopted single front-end technology. So it actually helped us move further, and it helped us create one UI library, which then became the part of the design system. So now let's talk about how we started the design system. So first of all, I would like to summarize maybe my understanding of design system. So I think it's pretty classic. So I see that there's the design system should consist of content. In our case, it's the UI library supported by various tools for developers or designers. Then it's complemented by guidelines, basically giving instruction of how to use, explaining use cases, how to use components and patterns, even general guidelines about, I don't know, accessibility, voice and tone. And maybe the most important part is the process part, because from my experience, basically deploying or starting design system in Quadient was about change management. It was about like persuading people. It was about changing things, and it means new processes, new procedures. So I like, or when I first saw this picture, I think it was in an article by Nathan Curtis. I like this idea, like a design system is a product. It's a product serving other products. And when we were thinking how to start with the design system in our company, actually an idea occurred to me. So why don't we because we started pretty small, like without proper budget and without a lot of things under control. So I say, why don't we treat the design system as a product? So we should add the design system as another product to our product range. So let me think for a while how, or let me explain how we deliver product. So what we do, so there's the product delivery team, which is there are multiple skills involved. So there are designers, UX designers, UI designers, there are developers who develop the code, there are technical writers, there are people, because we create kind of complex software, so there's training involved, marketing teams, I don't know, support teams, and this is shipped to the customer. Customer pays money for it to the company, and that means we have budget so we can improve the product. And this was a very interesting thing, because okay, so we want to have another product in our product range, but since our company is pretty like customer focused, and it's quite difficult to realize, difficult to make happen projects which are not billable directly, which are not asked by customers. So it was a challenge. So let me summarize this part. So let me give you some ideas to think on. So when you start with the design system, one way could be, and it was for us, to treat the design system as a new product which you add to your product line. There's one more advantage to this. You don't have to, basically, you don't have to assemble a dedicated team, and because you can, as with regular product, you can use the experts which are already there. So you can use the coders, the developers, you can use the designers, you can use the I don't know, tech writers, stuff. So this is how we started. So when we started, it was pretty important to explain the value, because as I said, it was pretty difficult to get budget for that, and because it was not a customer-facing project. So what we did, I used a lot of arguments. I'm giving some examples here on this slide, and actually. Then I used some other techniques, like which I explain later. So the arguments we used, and it was pretty strong because the management actually felt it. It was the need for consistency. So it was pretty strong, and basically everybody listened to that. I could even promise faster meaning cheaper UI development and better time to market, which is something really important for the customers. And again, it proved to be like right argument. But there was a little catch, because when we started with like new techniques, new components, at the beginning, sometimes people complain that it's like more work and makes it more expensive. But over the time, this return of investment should be there. Then, thanks to the system and basically shared resources, shared components, it's easier to innovate, and it's basically easier, faster to develop the UI. So it's even good for like people or front-end developers onboarding, because they basically it's simpler to create the UI using this. What is also important, it's to show results fast. So we just started with things because we, as the design team, we were the drivers of the change that we had under control. So we started with the documentation, and so we are starting showing that something's going on. So what next? What is important? Because introducing design system into a company definitely is a big change. So it's basically change management project. So what is important, in my opinion, it's to create a sense of urgency. So apart from these like nice reasons like consistency and customer focus, whatever, We also use kind of like I would say maybe sometimes manipulation to some more aggressive techniques to persuade key people. So we agree that competition already has it. It's a trend. And there was one important thing, because we already had the UI component library, and it became a real problem because it was bloated and nobody could actually understand the content. So I used it as an argument, like, okay, so we need to do something about it, otherwise we have a problem. And of course, you need to be persistent because it's change and people will resist. So some examples of resistance we encountered. I don't know. I'm gonna read this, but what I would pinpoint is actually, and this made it to the title of this talk. It's the team or product focused mindset, the team autonomy. You know, so it was, I think, the biggest problem in our particular situation. It still is an issue to be like overcome. And the last but not least, the product management. The customers will not pay for this, so it's a pretty big obstacle. So what we learned. So we believe, or I believe, that it's a good way of implementing a design system to treat it as a product. You need to be ready to explain the value, and repeatedly, persistently. And you need to be able to create a feeling of urgency to get this change moving. Okay, so what we have done so far. We started in the design team. It was not obvious to me at first, because I somehow presumed that the design team was on board, because we wanted, and everybody said we wanted consistency, we want that. But I realized later on that this was not for granted. So do not assume that your team is on board, basically. So we started basically cleaning. We started cleaning our own house. So first of all, what we did is we assigned a designer who is fully responsible, whose sole project is the design system, or library. So we call him, for some reason, we call him a librarian. And what we also did, that we basically made all designers to learn the system, because at the beginning the system was complicated. So we need to get the people to get familiar with the system, to improve the design to development handover. So we had to be really strict about it. So we started really strictly demand, like, for example, referencing components or other parts of the system, and following the standards. And so we became really strict. Definitely, some designers complained, because they complained about the lack of creativity, lack of like free design spirit, and so on and so forth. But at the beginning, we needed to be really strict. We introduced a new process for introducing new components or innovating components. We did a lot of design workshop. We really increased communication, peer review, and stuff. And to help designers to deliver, we created a design kit, which part of which I'm showing right now. So really, the first thing was to basically keep things tidy in the design team, because the design team as such was sometimes the source of inconsistency. So then we focused on the content, on the component library. So the librarian, basically, the first step was that he moved to the same room with the component developers. It sounds simple, but it was a pretty important step, because basically these guys started talking to each other, and they aligned their vocabulary and I don't know, updated the content, and also last but not least, they together they improved the user experience of the library, so it's easier to search. There's a configurator for components. So I'm going to show you one page from the component library, which is my favorite one because it's the first page whose shape is like basically as we want it. So there's a configurator and the preview, and so it's kind of how we want it. What we are doing, so what further things we're doing. So this is about the design system, about the design team and about the content, but this is about the product ecosystem, because the product, the design system as every product, it doesn't live in a vacuum. So and this slide is pretty simple, but it's about the change management. So still, and it's still today because we are basically at the beginning. So we promote the idea, we present it to the company, to the management, we present the benefits, we talk with the I don't know UI architects, and we try to improve the status of this project basically every day. We also we are adding content, and we are improving guidelines. We're moving from like small parts to larger patterns. We have a dedicated technical writer on the project, which is a good thing because now I can say that the design system documentation is professional. We focus on internal marketing, so not only to the management and key stakeholders, but we issue a monthly newsletter, basically listing or summarizing what's new in the design system and in the world of the UI components. Also, as a kind of new thing, there's a training course for new developers, for junior developers to learn how to use the technology and how to leverage the system. Another thing, when we created or when we updated the UX UI designers competency matrix, we added the knowledge of design system as a new skill. So now we require basically the designers to get familiar with that. And we're still dealing with the general processes, like how to deploy components to products and how to update content and innovate. So these are the processes which these are tasks which influence the whole company. So this is just some screenshots from the design system documentation, and on the right hand side there's an email newsletter we send every month. So it's just to show. Okay, so we're getting to an end. So where we are now. So we have successfully started the design system project or product in Quadient, and we tackled it as if it was another product we added to our product range. So what are the benefits, in my opinion? I think the main benefit is that like the UI, the UX topics are not locked in a silo, like in a design team or in a design system team, and they can be shared across the whole organization. Another thing is that the work is done by experts, so you need documentation, ask technical writer, you need visual design, ask a visual designer. So, and it is done exactly in the same way as for the products which are shipped to the customer, the external customer. And I think this approach allowed us to like gradually grow, gradually get support step by step, budget and support step by step. On the other hand, there are some downsides, definitely, because it's a big change management project. It's sometimes difficult to coordinate efforts, and it's kind of demanding to change the behaviors and sometimes even impossible to change the attitudes of people involved who are basically outside your area of influence. So it's not easy, but I think it's worth it. So this is the story about the Quadient Design System, and thank you for attention. Thank you. I hope you found something valuable in there. Thanks again. Thanks to our excellent hosts, and I will just hand over to Luděk.
Thanks a lot, Ondřej. What a great talk, and also journey you had with your design system at the Quadient. Maybe just a quick question, and the other questions can be answered later in the Q&A session. When exactly did you start getting the buy-in in management? Which year did you start it?
I think it was at the beginning of last year, because we started working on design system in 2018. It was kind of hidden a little bit, and at the beginning of 2019, so it took about a year. Then it became part of my business plan, so it was official.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot again. It was
You're welcome.
Pretty good talk, and let's move on to another talk, another speaker, which is Richard, also from Quadient. He's working there as UX designer, and he will tell us more how to solve inconsistencies in patterns. Hello, Richard.
Hello, Luděk.
Hi.
Thank you for introducing me. So my name is Richard Grof. I work in Quadient for 30 years now, and I've been okay. You see my presentation?
We see your notes, so you have to choose the other screen.
Good enough. Technical problems always happen to me.
Yeah, great. Now we see the presentation.
Okay.
Okay, you have the word. Let's start.
So you see, I'm prepared. I'm having my notes, which is good.
Okay.
So I'm working as a user designer now, third year in Quadient, and today I would like to talk about the problems caused by anatomy of teams, and I will tell you something more about inconsistency in patterns. Okay, there we go. So what problems we are facing, as Ondřej mentioned, the project teams are focused on delivery features, and there is a limited budget for not billable activities. Also, one of the problems is that each department had its point of view, but there was a kind of center point on how to look on user interface. Information was shared by word of mouth. There was a lot of discussion on details, but not guidelines on how to use layouts or interaction patterns. Another problems we are facing are as I mentioned, there is a lack of centralized knowledge. Teams have their own silos for serving primary their task. There is way too many components and its variations. Often it's very multi-purpose, single-purpose components with uniquely designed layouts per applications. And recently, the company came with a requirement for accessibility, which was quite difficult to deliver because of unique design components and patterns. I would say a lack of basic standards. So it was pretty challenging for us. When we started to think about our design system, it was very many things to do, and it was hard to decide where to start first. So we had to prioritize and we had to really look deep in our fundamentals and prioritize the activities. Some of the activities had to run simultaneously, even we don't have enough resources. So usually we started something, then we moved to another priority, and so on. Then we came back to it. What our important part or important milestone was that we had this. I started working as a dedicated person as a librarian, as the how I'm called in the company. Basically, I primarily focus on being proxy between designers and developers and validate requests and so on. One of the tasks when we started, we have identified what need to be documented. We took inspiration outside, of course. We looked on the major leaders in the industry, and we created a workshop on structuring our content when we decided what should be documented. Also, we had to look on our visual language. We revisited our visual properties to simplify visual language and minimize design decisions, because there was too many components, and basically each component had its quite complex visual guidelines, sometimes included some interaction behavior and design variation. So it was very difficult to find and even harder to maintain, because it was created as a PSD export, and nobody wanted to look at it, find it. So sometimes it was easier to create a new variation rather than find what it's supposed to do and where to find it. Also, we introduced design tokens to synchronize design values with our code base. And we did a lot of presentation for designers and developers on accessibility. So I can say that our designers know about the principles. So when we starting a design, we think about structuring, semantics, and contrast, which was something which wasn't in the company a few years ago. One other big milestone was that we had to stop direct requests from design teams to our component team, because there was a place where a lot of consistency started. New requests are now being discussed through our Teams channel and validated through design system designer, which is me. Potential problems are being solved within a narrow and dedicated UX team and presented on peer review. We call it design critique. Another activity we did was component inventory. We had to declutter our library because we cannot afford our remove unwanted components or variants from library from legacy reasons. So we remove obsolete components. We identified some scope for the components like layout specific or helper. We try to hide helpers from the general view only for the developers, and we categorize them in the pattern. And we also introduce some deprecated state, which was the way how we can gradually removing the component, but we cannot afford to obsolete it straight away. Also, we try to automate and make the gallery user-friendly. So the gallery contains many examples without clear way of use. Visual and behavior parameters are now being curated from user experience perspective. So rather than focusing on our visual or behavior groups or examples. We are trying to group it into some some use cases which actually been helpful for our users. We also worked on our content strategy, because before that we had only I would say grammar and mechanics section, which was partly maintained by technical writers and UX designers, but it wasn't enough. We need to introduce some UX writing and train a dedicated train a technical user, which we are collaborating on getting the message across between a user experience and technical documentation or documentation team. Yes, it's not enough. We have good feedbacks. Usually customers are and feedback from user testing, where we measure efficiency and satisfaction of individual scenarios, generally with positive feedback on usability and visual design. But we also notice that our applications are difficult to learn, which reveals problem inconsistency of our design patterns. A part of the problem with managing assets and processes, which are the main cause of inconsistency in patterns. We're also dealing with inconsistency in existing products. Typical UI patterns and interaction patterns are our product mainly consists of data management and visual editors. We are often using various editing methods, including drag and drop, and all the products also taking advantage of functionality from our core desktop application, including patterns and that are often obsolete from today's view of cloud applications. So we are dealing even with some legacy of patterns which are based on from very old desktop applications. Sometimes it's being reused to the newer application, and create some inconsistencies as well. What I found the hard way, that product teams are often biased by business logic and having difficulties to abstract our this has been often translated into requests for single purpose components. So sometimes we have very close components, but the reason was because they were delivering requested for a particular business logic. So we had to look at it. This is the example. Sometimes we have very similar, I would say, design patterns, but we have some inconsistencies there. In order to solve this problem, we had to take inventory of our products. Especially, we had to look on the layouts and functionality. For example, we are identify tables and associated functionality and identified some key features. So basically, this is quite common that complex tables can have some navigations and filtering. It's kind of a template rather than some component or a page template. But these situations have been looked and abstract from the business logic, and then we had to revisit our existing patterns. We wanted to recognize if we needed to have a different layouts through our application. We interviewed UX designers on products and reviewed user tasks and use cases. By comparing user tasks for novice and technical user, we have realized that we don't need different layout variants, but just extending functionality for technical users. We have found inconsistencies in editing and selecting methods. Also, we have identified opportunities to improve visual hierarchy and filtering. So what I'm saying here that we have to look on our patterns and decide whether these variants have some commonalities or what are the inconsistencies or what are the user needs. Later on, we run user experience workshop in this classical design studio, and we try to find out the ideal layout and improve filtering. Once we did that, we considered the best usability practice and created a prototype. Later, we validate the prototype with a dedicated UX team and document it. We found a good default variant, which we intended to expand and optimize according our defined use cases. So this workshop gave us solve us the problem we were looking for. We solve some usability problems. We find good default for our content manager, and we improved the filtering. This workshop was timed for needs of our key product. We wanted to find a way how to utilize product budget for activity which would be beneficial for an entire portfolio. In addition of solving problem, another benefit was team alignment. What I'm saying here that we try to utilize the budget of our key product, and we were looking for the ways how actually we can solve the problem of inconsistency through our portfolio, but it was assigned to budget of one product. So we had some findings which the product could implement straight away, and it was also a good start for our next iterations. One of the second challenge we are having is the spotting some opportunities to continue improve our design system. Our typical example is that recently we had several, I would say, parallel redesigns and concept at the same time, which is not easy to manage from a design system point of view. So we were trying to continue to find enhance our patterns or components. Another challenge is find good results from user testing or customer feedback, because often user testing reveals problems which are related to whole component or pattern, but usually what happens, it's only fixed on particular feature in the testing scenario. So here are some tips for which we are trying to do in order to solve this problem. We have created a space in our content management system for UX findings with tagging for design system related issues. So when some user testing issue it's related to the component or pattern, we will have a way to see to look at it and holistically fix it. I think this is the last slide of my presentation. The lesson learned: be proactive and lead by examples. Sometimes, or in the beginning, when we try to do some proposals, we try to collect user feedback, but it wasn't enough. We had to be really proactive. We have to include research and testing, focus on the user needs, not only functionality, educate if necessary. We did a lot of presentation. I present to the team a new concepts. We collect feedback and we have a discussion on concepts we're trying to solve. And documenting is important. Do it as soon as possible. So thank you for listening. I hope some of the examples were useful for you. They weren't too specific to our company, and hopefully somebody can find some inspiration. Okay, Luděk.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Richard. Amazing talk, full of inspirational, let's say, information or value. And without further ado, let's move to the questions and answers session. So I will just share the slide view and took over the sharing. And for now, we have in total probably 10 questions. So if you have any questions to Ondřej or Richard, go to slido.com with the code DS_CZE and put your questions there. And without any further ado, let's look on the first questions. Do you measure your design system in any way? If so, how? Probably a question for Ondřej.
It's an interesting question because I think short answer would be no, because we focus on when we measure, we focus on like user experience as such, and I think the design system can be beneficial for things we measure, because as we design employee experiences, so we design software for professionals, so we mostly focus on task efficiency. And when we design user experience, we focus on task efficiency. So we focus on task completion times, and metrics like that. And we believe that especially cross-product consistency can increase learnability and in effect task efficiency. But I don't know if I'm answering the question right, but the design system as such, I don't think we like measure it in a way which would be like which would prove, I don't know, the success as far as the project as such is concerned. So we have milestones, so we measure like achieving milestones for sure, but maybe I would need more context to the question.
Yeah, I agree. It's, in my opinion, it can be very hard to measure somehow your design system, its success and the benefits that it provides. So I would, in the end, have this question as answered, because it's a big topic in the community, I would say. And let's move on to another question.
Okay, so what was the most challenging in terms of adding accessibility into your design system? This question for Richard. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. I have to say that we have to start really from the beginning, because our code base were, I would say, not really W3C friendly. That means web standards. So we have to use a lot of Arias tags. But I think the most challenging part was the educate the people, to really to educate the designers, to educate the developers, to have common understanding of the problem. Also, one of the biggest problems was complex components. Complex components were created without common design patterns, without competence, so quite uniquely composed components with so create successful keyboard access is very challenging, because when you ignore the best practices or patterns, it's hard to fix it with ARIA or JavaScript. So if I summarize the question, align the people and understand the problems, and then the real complex components.
Thank you very much. Let's move to the next question.
Okay, so the next question is, how did you convince experts in other product teams to spend time on the design system and prioritize it over their product work? Probably a question for Ondřej, I would say.
Yeah, I will take it. Yes, it's a valid question. I think things. I will start from the end. I think the things started getting better when the design system became an official supported project. So basically, things were not requested anymore, so they were like ordered. So the processes changed. So and for example, the front end framework became a fact. So it was obligatory for the product teams to use it and even to contribute. And for other teams, you know, so when it became official, so what happened? Even like some teams offered help, you know, so because they liked the idea. So it was partly when it became official. So people basically were required to do it, and some people even came forward because they liked because there were more people than us and me and Richard who were not content with the state of the user interface code and stuff. So it wasn't so challenging.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Ondřej.
Next question. How many contributors or dedicated team members do you have? I think it's again for Ondřej.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's a tricky one, because our approach is that we do not have like let's say a dedicated team whose sole responsibility is the design system. And but just there are some people who spent most of their time on this project, starting with Richard, the librarian, who's it's his sole responsibility. Then there is the component team, but they have also other tasks sometimes. And then there are like contributors from the developers, and so actually we do not work with like consistent design system team. So the response, so it's more like a project. It's like a matrix or organization. So the number of people who really spent 100% of their time on this is pretty small, but the idea is to share the efforts in the organization the same way as we do it with our regular products. So if this answer suffice. I'm not able to say exact number. I think it's like maybe. Richard, what do you say? How many people work 100% on design system?
Okay, I'll be quite frank on this. So it's myself who organizing managing the work, creating some priorities, writing documentation, preparing the documentation, doing this I would say inconsistency work. Then I have one visual designer who is helping me part-time. We have now a documentarist, and we have three component developers which are assigned to
so 5 or 6 people,
let's say.
Okay, great, thanks. The next question will be for Richard. Do you solve founded inconsistencies in the code when doing redesign of some feature or continuously? Richard?
Yes, okay. How it works right now is that we have some component library which can have versions. Products can use version of the component. Some product can even fix on some version, even though it's not recommended that it can happen. So sometimes when we redesign the component, it can be updated. But sometimes when we do some larger composition, it needs to be redesigned, and then it's on adopting on the product that usually on the new product when the components is going to be adopted, or if there is the budget and priority on particular project to replace the component, so they can do that in their own time. But of course there is a code inconsistency, but I'm not the person who codes right now, so this is the issue of our developers, and I believe that is handled by them.
Okay, great. Next question.
Do you think that any design system is a good way to improve our products, even in a smaller developer designers team? What is important? I think we can ask both our speakers on this. Let's start with Ondřej now.
Okay, I don't know what your product is first, but I think it depends, because there is I like one idea, and it's basically if you design for like the same users, like multiple use cases, the same users or user personas, let's say. So when basically consistency is dominant over like one individual use case, I think it's better to have some kind of system, and it doesn't have to be like full-scale system, I think, but I think there's this idea of like visual frameworks and UI frameworks, which you can definitely start with. So basically referencing, so do not copy paste, just reference objects and stuff like that. So and I think there are different scales of this like visual frameworks, and the design system is maybe the most developed one, as I can see it, and so I think it might be beneficial even for a small team if you basically if you feel the need of reusing patterns, so that it might be worth to think about the design system. If you design basically individual, for example, customer focused projects, maybe the priority would be lower.
Thank you. That was a great answer. Richard, do you have anything to add to this?
I would say that I see, because the benefits that alignment of design and developer, that syncing the ideas from design and code view into something which can be applied on the goals, on the business goals. So some I would say use cases we having, but not from the each perspective, but from the one perspective as some kind of GUI architecture, I would say, because often can be just two guidelines which they don't meet each other in some strategic point.
Thank you very much. I agree. Okay, so last two questions because we are running out of time. So yes, how long did it took to get the buy-in from management? Would you do something differently? I think Ondřej already mentioned that, but if you want to add something to that, feel free to do it.
Yeah. I already said earlier that it took, I think, roughly around a year. And it was kind of awkward, you know, because I started basically talking. I started raising this topic at some like management meetings, workshops, and with my boss, who's the director of development. And so it was okay. And I think the first perception was that it is something. So the general response was okay. So design system. So I'm not interested in that because it's something inside the design team. So, okay, so do what you want. Basically, you have a free hand. And I think it took some time and really around a year for the management to realize that it impacts not only the design team, but it impacts the whole, basically the process of development. So, because at the beginning, I have to say that the situation was quite hard because people were not familiar with what design system means, and you know they knew, for example, the material design by Google or something like that, but they didn't make the connection. So it was pretty. I think I remember it was really like after 1 year when I had actually the buy-in because I was presenting at some like basically top management meeting, and one of the guys said, okay, so this is this and this, and this could help us this way, you know. And I said, yes, exactly, that's the point. And it took like a year. Okay, so that's from my side.
Okay, thanks, Ondřej. And the last question is, how do you understand when introduction of a new component is necessary? I would say that this question is for both of you.
I will let Richard start.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a very good question, and it's also tricky. Well, first of all, let's have a look what we've got and see if we don't have a variant for that, or if we can compose it from something, or have a look if it's really a need for reusability, if this is only functionality which can be implemented, or if this is a real need for something which can be specific but has a potential for reuse. So if we answer all these questions, we can have a discussion. We can have some solid foundation for further discussion. But so I think I answered.
Yeah, you did. Thanks, Richard. Okay, so that was it. Last two questions. With those that they're still there, we will try to answer it after this meetup with Ondřej and Richard and put it on our social media, so it will be answered at some point. And now I will give a word to Honza.
Thank you, Luděk. Thank you also to Ondřej and Richard for answering the questions and their talks. I really enjoyed them. Also, we are looking for another speakers, and we are planning our next meetup for end of August or September. So if you have a talk, if you want to share your experience with design system, if you want to share how you do design systems in your company, reach out to me or reach out to Luděk or to our community profile on Twitter. We have DMs open, so that should be easy for you. Also visit our design system community website. We have recordings from last talks there, and thank you for coming. Thank you for being here today with us, and see you next time. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for the invite. Bye.